Let's talk for a few minutes here about how we can help our kids grow up to be good people. In the next 7 or 8 minutes or so, we have to deal with inculcating moral values into them, giving them some perspective on the world, setting a moral philosophy and a kind of worldview that will sustain them throughout their lives. We'll have to help them express their emotions properly, and we'll also have to help them have a sense of compassion for their fellow human beings. We'll try to do that in the next 7 minutes. It sounds impossible, but somehow or another, kids come out of their childhood, and they come out good people for the most part. Is there anything we can consciously do, Michael, do you think?
Well, there is. And the first thing to do is get away from the old-fashioned view of child rearing, and that is you tell them, and you tell them again, and if they don't do it right, you hit them. You know, you get away from that, and what you realize is that in raising children, the first thing to do is raise yourself. I never became quite so aware of my impatience, my problems handling responsibility, my problems listening, as when it came time to attend to a child. So what worked for me was trying to help myself mature, trying to help myself become a good person, because kids are very attentive. You know, we often raise our kids as if they had perfect hearing. They could hear our lectures just exquisitely, but they didn't see very well. They couldn't see anything we were doing. And the reality for me is that it's exactly the opposite. I could lecture till I was blue in the face and nothing happened, but do one thing, and they would imitate it. So that the kids are a mirror for me. You know, as soon as I see something going wrong with the kids, I'm like, where did they get that? Like, whoops, I know. So
if you use guilt on your kids, you're going to find them turning right around and using it right back on you.
And using it on you.
At any time. If you use comparison, if you compare one kid to the other, for example, you might say, well, your sister did this or your brother did this, so why don't you, instead of treating them as unique, you'll find them turning around and saying, well, but Billy's mother down the street allows him to go smoking, you know, and they'll do the very same thing right back to you. I think being a model is probably the most important thing you can be.
Example.
As a, an example. It's like what you are presenting to them every day is exactly what they have as an example of what they can become. And if you are neurotic, if you're full of fears about yourself, you don't have confidence in yourself, if you're prejudiced, if you've got hates in you, even if you're tight and any of those kinds of things, then, or if you drink a lot, if you smoke, whatever it may be, then you are presenting this to your children as something that is acceptable to them. And you've got to really look at you in terms of being an effective father, I think. Anyway.
When I was very young, my father told me a wonderful story, which I've heard repeated. As a matter of fact, a dear friend of mine from Ohio told me a story. It was in his family. My people are Eastern European originally, so it was in Eastern Europe, and it's obviously German or English. The story was this, that a father went ahead with a grandfather. He had his father, and he went out into the barn. He had an old man in the house and a son. He went out into the barn, and he prepared a place for his father to sleep in the barn with a blanket from a horse. And his little son watched him. And the next day, the father noted that the son was preparing a blanket in the barn. And the father said, why are you doing that? He said, well, Dad, I'm preparing for the fact for when you grow old. In other words, as the child perceives the father acting towards his father, so the son was going to act towards him. And it seems to me example, if we behave compassionately, if we behave lovingly.
And I would like to add an 11th commandment that is honor thy children. I think a lot of time that gets missed, and parents expect their kids to honor them and respect them without extending it the other way. St. Francis says, grant that I may not so much seek to be obeyed as to understand. Grant that I may not seek so much to be honored as to love, to be justified as to console, for it is in giving ourselves that we heal, it is in listening that we communicate love. And I think that's important, that we don't need to set ourselves up as the authority. Parents are full of evaluation. Don't touch that, it's dirty. Don't drink that, it's been sitting out. Don't play with that boy.
We're big and they're little. And when somebody is little, it's like, it's almost like a domination. It's almost like a slavery, a form of slavery. You know, if you will do as I tell you to do, and you will not ask questions. And even this business you talked about hitting, which I've never done to any of my children. I've never raised,
I never have. And I don't believe in that at all. That's the first rule, is don't hit.
But I have relatives who do, and it's interesting when they come and visit, and I watch them hit their kids. They're slapping them around all the time, and I think to myself, if this worked, you would only have to do it like once every 5 years. You know? But if they're hitting them all the time. I mean, and you see their kids go flying across the room when they talk back or when they look the wrong way or when they don't do something. And then you see what happens with those children is that they grow up and that's modeled for them.
Yes.
And they become the people who hit their children.
When the kids get bigger, the parents no longer hit them.
Yeah, but they hit their
never seen
children.
a parent hit
no, you don't hit your children.
I've often thought that the two most evil men of the 20th century thus far, please God spare us, is Stalin and Hitler. Both of them were children who were physically abused by drunken fathers. They were both beaten in their childhood. And it seems to me that this is a lesson for humanity. That's what you get. You beat and abuse a child, and you're going to get somebody who grows up who's going to use power in an arbitrary and horrendous fashion.
Let's take a call here. Good morning. Go right ahead.
Yes. I have a 17-year-old son who does not really get along with his dad. Maybe the dad doesn't get along with the son. But the two of them are constantly at each other, just verbally, trying to outmatch, and always is, you know, the son wants the last word, the father wants the last word. What can we do to kind of work out of that? It's really getting to me after a while.
Does the son seem to emulate the father in other ways? It seems like he's emulating him in terms of arguing with him. The father argues and he argues back. Does he emulate him in other ways? Are his values similar?
Well, I guess. I think they are. I think they're alike in a lot of ways.
Too bad the father isn't calling in. It's very difficult for me to tell a wife how to fix things up between these two people when these two people are the ones that are going to have to work on it. I think that you get treated in life, what I believe, the way you teach people to treat you. And if there is arguing and fighting and all of this kind of thing going on between two people, it's because that is what you have taught this young person, how you communicate with me, how you're going to be with me as a human being. If the father, who is the responsible person, the adult supposedly in this relationship, would simply say, I refuse to be this kind of a person. When I would counsel with young people at 17 in my office, I would tell them, you're only fighting with your father because you choose to. If you don't want to fight, there are certain ways to avoid having to do that completely. And the same thing is true of the father. Both of them are making a choice, and until they understand that, I think it's going to continue.
Family therapy may not be possible, but if you can recruit them for family therapy, what you learn is to compromise and negotiate. When you have win-lose situations, whether it's husband and wife or parent and child, if anybody wins, everybody loses. You can't have a winner in a family situation, or everybody's a loser. So you've got to get away from the win-lose framework.
One of the most difficult things that I've had to learn as a father is to say to my children, I am wrong, and to apologize when I am wrong. And I find that this works wonders.
That's the most important thing.
It works wonders. When you are wrong and you do so, the child sees you. It's a wonderful moment of reconciliation.
Really
Eric Siegel had it exactly backwards. Not only wrong, but 180 degrees. Love is not having to say you're sorry. Love, in fact, is being able to say
you're sorry.
I'm sorry, I was wrong,
Absolutely.
you're right.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
the
there's an
essence of
infantile notion.
Let's go to our audience.
A few questions out here, Fred. Yours is the first one.
This is a question that doesn't have to deal with just the fathers, but fathers and mothers. What about the role of religion in a family right now, particularly with a lot of families where there's an interfaith marriage and the impact of religion on how you're raising your kids?
It seems to me that you make a decision about this between you, the husband and wife. And it seems to me that, again, a religious life or a moral life is taught best by example. That if you are compassionate, and if you show compassion outside the home, within the home, you will bring your child up to revere this thing. It is, again, example. It's doing. And it seems to me that this is the way one inculcates moral and religious values, by acting in a moral and religious way. Not so much preaching, but by showing, by doing. It's very difficult, but it seems to me that this is the secret.
I have a reaction to that. I think this business of traditional religion, like if you have a child and this child comes into your home and you're Catholic, Protestant, Jew, whatever it is, and the assumption is that this child also is required to be that because he happened to come through you. I think that's kind of an authoritarian position to take. I want my children to grow up and be exposed to all religions and to be moral in the things that you talked about and be an example. But I don't want them to be anything that I have chosen to be necessarily for myself. That is really a contrary position in our society. I understand it. But if they want to go to a temple, that's where they ought to go, to a temple.
That's a view we've followed, and we have rather an ecumenical family at this point. Our 3 older daughters are married, and we have a Protestant Jewish marriage, a Protestant Catholic marriage, and a Protestant